collapsing bee populations in America have reminded me of a quote, supposedly by Einstein, that if the bee were to disappear off the face of the earth, mankind would follow 4 years later. I met Friends of the Earth campaigner Stanley Neal, who explained to me why bees are important for more than honey.
Bees pollinate 75% of the different kinds of crops that we have and 1/3 of our food. So if we don't look after bees and we're chopping down habitat and using pesticides and not looking after their health, we may end up like China. In parts of China, they have people who are going out, climbing in small trees and pollinating with brushes. And if we had to do that in Europe, in Britain, if we killed the bees, that would cost us 1.8 billion a year.
I went to meet Alistair McGregor, Chief Operating Officer of Trucost, to find out more about ecosystem services. Nature doing work for us.
So bees are a really excellent example, real example today of where we benefit from ecosystem services. So pollination globally is worth somewhere in the region of $200 billion. What we've seen is a huge reduction in bee populations. There are a number of reasons given for this, but certainly one of them appears to be the use of insecticides. So farmers have been using specific types of insecticides which have apparently reduced bee populations, and the impact of that has been that farmers, the very farmers that applied the pesticides, are now having to pay beekeepers huge amounts of money. It's big business, beekeeping, paying beekeepers to bring their bees to their farms so they can pollinate their crops. So these are crops like almonds, oranges, and so on. So there we have an example where a lack of understanding, but also a strive to increase yield has actually caused a drop in yield and an increase in cost.
So damaging ecosystem services costs us money, and through that we can work out its natural capital value. Does this mean that we can actually put a price on an individual bee?
That's right. If you knew the number of bees and you knew the value of pollination globally, you could derive the value for a bee. So if we're saying that pollination globally is worth about 200 billion and it's bees and some other insects that pollinate, if you could then define the number, you would come up with the value per insect. And at $200 billion, it's got to be a fairly material amount per individual insect.
And it's not just bees that we can work out value for.
Natural capital is the flow of resources to society and business from the environment. They're things such as clean air, fresh water, and biodiversity. They're typically not priced, so we use a science called environmental economics to put a price on those services, which allows integration into business and other decision making.
But you don't need to study bees in California to understand natural capital. I went to the London Wetlands Centre, which was founded by Sir Peter Scott, son of Antarctic explorer Robert Falcon Scott. Peter Morris explained to me what services the land itself provides us. So Pete, we're at the London Wetlands Centre. We're not far from Heathrow. We can see the planes flying overhead. We can hear the sirens. Surely this land is useless as it is. Shouldn't we, build houses on it, or build warehouses or factories, put some money into the economy?
It's a common misconception that wetlands are valueless. There's a massive value, not just as a haven to come away from the hubbub of London or any city life, but there's a lot of practical value. They're huge storage tanks. They store carbon from the air, almost 3 times as much as forests, some type of wetlands, but also rainwater, obviously, in the lakes, which would otherwise skim off our roads and our roofs and flood through in our towns. They also, by releasing that water slowly, they filtrate it, so they actually clean the water going into our rivers and into our reservoirs for drinking water. And the really cool thing is, as wetlands filter out those particulates, they use them as nutrients to grow a huge variety of rich wildlife, which gives us natural resources, things like fish stocks and reeds that are used in industry. So industry and economy benefits.
So just by being here, as they are, these wetlands take what would otherwise be waste, and for free, they make things that we need and that we use, and they stop damage to things like London, they stop flooding, and they stop carbon otherwise going into the atmosphere?
And we can put some financial values on those. It's estimated that in the UK alone, the flood protection value per year for wetlands is about $3 billion. The water cleaning services, about $2 billion. The biological diversity they generate, another $2 billion. Plus a few bits and bobs, it's about $8.5 billion worth in the UK alone. Globally, the figure for wetland services to people is about $15 trillion. A massive amount. I'll tell you what that equates to. It's about the same as the GDP of the USA. In other words, the entire effort of the American workforce every year gives us about the same value as wetlands do for free.
So that's incredible. Just leaving wetlands as they are is worth as much as the entire American economy to us.
The opportunity cost of losing these sorts of landscapes would have to be met through building huge concrete flood defences and filtration plants. That would cost business and government a lot of money, which they would have to pass on through higher prices and higher taxes to us. And it's not just the financial cost, of course, it's the clean water, the clean air, the food, and just the ambience of having nice places around. What price can you put on that?
The story of bees and wetlands tells us how much we depend on ecosystem services. But it may be a struggle to balance future economic growth against our damage to these delicate systems.